Okay, so my question is pure self able to talk, or is it that if I'm talking or having thoughts, etc., that this is an aspect of my personality as in a part?
Okay, what would you like to say to this? Okay, they're saying self is all of the above and so much more. I kind of like go out here with this. They're saying self is the essence of everything. The essence, the essence, the essence, the essence, the essence. What are you saying here? I did their words literally were say that again. They're like, we're speaking of self energy, of course, and they're showing me how it runs through all the parts of everyone. Okay, what are you wanting to say around this? Okay, they're saying what we will say to this is okay, can you make this a little more clear for me? Okay, they're talking about self energy being the foundation. And they're talking about parts, personality being wrapped around it. They're talking about a different way of being. Okay, can you make this a little more clear for me what you're saying here? They're saying it's all one and the same. It's just a different way of being here. Okay, what are you saying with this? What are you trying to show me here? Because I'm not getting this. Okay, they're saying when a word is spoken, that is both self and parts. When something is thought, they're talking about giving and receiving. Okay, they're talking about the giving. What are you saying with this? Sometimes the giving, sometimes the giving of the thought comes from self, directly from self energy, unthwarted by part energy. I mean, when they're saying this, they're showing it coming like I just see energy coming directly from my heart, and they're saying it's as I said that they said in the form of words. So and then as they were saying in the form of words, I saw that originally I saw the energy coming out from my heart, but then they said in the form of words, and I saw it go up, and it kind of went here and then comes out. They're saying it can come out if it leaves the mouth, like, but they're talking about it going up in here. Okay, what do you want to say here about this with regards to parts? Okay. They're talking about parts energy. They're talking about originating from multiple places. They're talking about there's often heart energy wrapped within it. They're saying there's always some degree of this for parts just innately have self too. That's just who they are. But they're talking about this additional energy, like they're talking about mind energy. When a part is carrying a burden, and they're talking about the stories they understand based on that burden. And they're talking about the carrying it here. Okay, what are you saying with this? They're just talking about this mind energy that comes with certain thoughts, certain things that are said out loud. Their words are thoughts that become things said out loud. Sometimes it carries that energy too. Sometimes it is just this heart energy, this self energy. Sometimes it is that burdened energy, that constructed energy, that protective energy. They're talking about it, they're talking about it being a spectrum of this, a spectrum of that, and so much in between. Yeah, they're just talking about it being a spectrum. Okay, they're pausing there. Does that help?
A little bit. So to clarify, what I'm hearing is how I interpret it is there's pure self, and then they talked about mind energy, and also our parts are another filter for words, maybe. So, and I'm just like interested about this to transform pure self essence and energy by this mind energy for words to come out. When they're talking about the mind, I'm a little bit confused about like, what is that then to make words? And because my like personal experience is it's almost how we relate, like when you're in flow state, you only know you're in flow state when you get out of it, right? So when I'm in pure presence, I only know I'm in pure presence after it, and I start thinking about it. It's like pure peace. But in it is once I use words, then I'm thinking, describing, it's a part of me talking about it.
Okay, what do you want to say to this? I mean, they're talking about spectrum. It was like I don't remember exactly what it was that you had said, but they started talking about this spectrum. They're talking about this spectrum. They're talking about their self energy all throughout this spectrum. They're talking about what do you want to say with this? Okay, they're talking about flow. They're talking about a greater depth of self energy, but what they're showing me with that, their words are, it's not just self energy. It's parts coming into their own self energy. It's like
Mhm.
what are you saying with this? They're talking about, I mean, the way they show it to me is it's like it kind of feels like these parts are kind of shrinking down into their own heart. But when I say shrinking down, it like gives parts of me of this idea of like hiding or fear or something. It's so shrinking doesn't really feel like it fits, but it's like just coming into here. They're talking about pulling their energy into here, and they're just exhibiting that self energy within them. They're saying the parts are all part of it.
Mhm.
They're saying you can't get away from your parts when you're human. They're talking about the burdens. They're just talking about burdens subtly moving out, even if it's just temporarily. Can you make this a little more clear for me? It feels like a paradox. What are you saying here? They're just talking about the burdens. It's like it's almost like they don't exist for a while, and like they don't exist for the parts that are participating in this. They don't exist for your experience of this. It's like it gets suspended in the moment. It's like they just get suspended in the moment. And they're talking about there was something that you had said when you started asking at the beginning of you talking about this follow-up question, and they said something about innocence. They're talking about the pure innocence of parts and the way they interact in the world. And they're saying that pure innocence is very, very, very different from the burdens they carry. Oh, what are you saying here? I mean, they're literally talking about how it's night and day. They're talking about we all have these like these concepts through our own minds of what parts look like and what self looks like and how they exist in the world. And they're talking about self and then parts that don't carry burdens or have no longer have their burdens, never had burdens, whatever it is for them. And they're talking about those are like over here on this big spectrum. They're much more alike in so many ways than how we tend to see parts, because we tend to see parts with their burdens front and center. And so we have this like cognitive perspective of how parts and self are different, and their words are they are so much more alike than that, so much more alike than that, because they just keep showing me self and parts not without any burdens being more over here. And they're even talking about the subtlety of these parts. They're talking about how like these parts are very subtle and self is often subtle. They're actually bringing me back to, I don't remember when this was or what the question was, but somehow the topic of like self-led people came up, and they were talking about how a lot of truly self-led individuals aren't like big well-known gurus doing stuff like that. Oftentimes they're they're kind of living like a low-key life. It might be, the neighbor that you pass who's working on their garden, and there's just something different about them. Again, because they're talking about that subtlety, the it's not like how do you want me to put this? It just, again, subtlety, there's something about it. It's like this being content with themselves. And yes, they have all these capabilities and abilities and things like that, and yet they don't feel the need to utilize them to the extent that we, speaking of us with who have these parts that are still holding these burdens and these protective roles, that we would go, oh, if we had that, we would do all these other things. And but in this place, there's no need to, because there's not that same drive that's pushing it forward. Like, yes, there are things that are being done, but it's kind of like saying, yeah, the world does need to be saved, and I have faith that what I'm doing here is going to contribute to that in exactly the way that it needs to. So I'm going to start by creating a garden in my own backyard and sharing my food with my neighbors, because I trust that that's enough. That's where my heart calls me to. That's what I feel the most joy in doing. This is what feels right to me, and I truly trust that this is going to have an enormous impact that it needs to have. And the difference between that and, oh my God, I have to save this world, I have to start this like really gigantic company, or I have to come up with this new modality, and I have to make sure that at least 90% of the people around me not only know about it, but they actually do it and believe in it or participate in it or whatever it is, this like this big urgency. Whereas and there this is not like that big emergency, but they're also talking about it being so much more low key. It doesn't have this like heightened, gotta get big, gotta go far, gotta do this, gotta do that. Like when I'm over here, I feel my body feels more rigid. And when I'm over here, what they're showing me here is like my heart is leading the show. It just is, and it is wide open, and it is beautiful, and I'm like I'm moving slowly according to my parts that would be over here, right? They're like, you, what are you doing? You're not even doing anything, right? But over here, what I can see is that, like, I'm looking at this person. They're gardening. They've turned their front yard and their backyard into a beautiful garden full of food, and they're giving it to the neighbors. And yes, these acts have an impact, but what they're also showing me is this self energy that's going out from this property. It goes like I see this person handing cucumbers to a neighbor, and so the energy goes with that, but I just see it seeping out into that physical space. Like it goes, like it seeps into the houses next door, and then it just kind of trickles outward from there. And every interaction, it trickles and it trickles and it trickles and it trickles. Like this is actually way more impactful despite its subtlety. Like it's one of those things where you're like, like our parts that have this idea of how you save the world would look at that and would be like, oh great, so we're all gonna be extinct before you change one little town. They're saying, but the truth is that will change everything. It's like that is just, they're talking about it being much more potent. And they're saying the parts are there too, with it, those parts that aren't carrying burdens. It's like they're talking about like that's the part that when you're doing this, it's like the part that says I want to grow cucumbers, and this other part says I want to grow blueberries, and this other part that says I want to grow an apple tree, and then this other part goes I don't want to grow anything, but I'm okay with building a fence or a scarecrow or whatever it is, right? They're like these are the things that I want to do. And then even the part that gets really excited to kind of skip and jump as you're going to your neighbor to give them the cucumbers that you grew for them. They're just talking about, they're just saying this to emphasize the innocence of parts when they're not holding those burdens, even when they are holding those burdens, but it's covered up by those burdens, and how it's so much closer to the experience of self, like pure self. Like when I said that, they said it is pure self with a different way of being here. It just is. And they're talking about like, cucumber can be a cucumber, or it can be a pickle, or it can be a puree. I mean, just talking about them being so much more like over here than when they have burdens, or how much burden or how many burdens among how many parts, and then the whole system has a massive amount of burdens, and they're going all the way over here. Okay. They're pausing there. Is that helpful?
Felt like a tangent. Um, what I'm getting is that, just sort of confirmation of my beliefs around there's pure self, pure essence, pure self, like God energy. And then that comes through us, and all of our parts, regardless if they have burdens or not, express any spectrum or level of self essence, which I understood. But my question was, if I'm talking, is it always a part?
They're saying no, it is not always a part. They're saying self can speak too.
Okay.
They're talking about the energy behind it.
Mhm.
The energy behind it, the energy, but like when they saying the energy behind it, like they're showing me the front of my heart, but they're showing behind my heart.
Mm.
And they're talking about like they're saying there can be burdens in forming this.
Mm.
Mm, they're talking okay, they're okay. Can you make this a little more clear for me what you're saying with this? It's like words. They're talking about words being for the mind, and parts can bring those in. And they're saying that energy is what makes the difference. And how much of what energy is there? Like they're saying sometimes you can have maybe 80% self energy in this like if you're just saying I love you to someone, right? Maybe you have 80% unconditional loving self energy in that, but you've got 20% is coming from parts who are secretly saying, please don't leave me, please don't walk away, please stay with me forever and always. And they're talking about that going into the person very differently from the way they're talking about like the physical words, the literal words spoken with the mouth go into their head. And they're talking about the energy with which we say it with. They're talking there's always they're talking about there's always they're saying that it's always self and parts energy that's coming through with it, and they're showing it being like that, like Dick says all the time with the clouds and the sun, like there's always that sun energy even when there's a ton of clouds in the way, or when there's only you're not even you can't even see a cloud forming yet because it's so tiny that's there. Yeah, and they're just saying always, always, always the self energy is in it.